2. My Amish father caught me with an English boy at 15. What happened after the lantern is shaking because my hand is shaking? I can smell the kerosene, the old hay, the rain that fell that afternoon. Caleb is still holding the wildflower he picked for me near the fence line, and his thumb is touching my wrist where my sleeve has slipped. My cap is tilted. My face is hot. My hands are cold. Then the barn door creaks behind us, slow, careful. The way only one person in the world walks across loose floorboards. I do not turn around. I already know. It is my father. My name is Rebecca, and on this channel I tell the quiet stories Amish women carry in their aprons and never say out loud. If you have ever lived between two worlds, stay with me tonight. Subscribe so you do not lose me. And before you go, tell me in the comments, what is the first secret you ever kept from your father? I was 15 years old that summer, the third of 7 children in a Lancaster County farmhouse, where the lamps were lit at 4 in the morning, and the bread was already rising before the rest of the world had blinked. My father was not a bishop, but he sat close to one. People listened when he cleared his throat. My mother was a woman of long silences, and for most of my childhood I mistook her silence for peace. I know now it was something else, something heavier, something she had folded into herself the way she folded sheets, neat, tight, invisible. I had worn the prayer cap since I was 12. By 15, it felt less like a covering and more like a small white roof I carried on my head. Wherever I went, the pins pulled at my scalp by evening. I never said so. In our ordnung, you did not say so. You woke before the sun. You milked the cows. You helped your mother knead. You went to school until the 8th grade. And then you became a woman without anyone telling you. The moment it had happened. One day you were a child. The next, you were folding the same sheets your mother folded, and your hands looked like hers. But I was the daughter who looked too long at passing cars. I was the one who lingered at the end of the lane when tourists slowed down to take pictures of our laundry on the line. I wondered what English girls my age were doing on a Saturday afternoon. I wondered if their fathers laughed at supper. I wondered if anyone had ever asked them what they thought about anything. I never said this out loud either. In a house like mine, wondering was a kind of sin you committed quietly, behind your eyes, where no one could see it. Caleb came into my life at our roadside produce stand. The summer I turned 15. He was 16, a local English boy whose family was about to move 2 states away for his father's work. He bought a basket of tomatoes the first Saturday. The second Saturday, sweet corn he clearly did not need. The third Saturday, a jar of my mother's chow chow, even though he wrinkled his nose at the smell. The fourth Saturday, he finally asked my name. I told him. And then I did something I had never done before in my life. I asked him his. What grew between us over those next weeks was not what people might imagine. It was not scandal. It was conversation. He folded little notes inside the brown paper bags he handed back to me. Questions about books, about the stars, about whether I had ever seen the ocean. I had not. He lent me a paperback novel through the slats of the fence one afternoon, a worn copy of something with a blue cover and a girl on the front who was looking at the sky. It was the first time anyone had ever asked me what I thought about anything. I read it under my quilt by candlelight and felt my chest opening, like a window I did not know had been shut. The first time our hands touched was the day he passed me that book. His fingers brushed mine, just for a second, and the whole world tilted. No one saw it. The cars kept passing. The wind kept moving through the corn. But something inside me had moved too, and it would not move back. I want to be careful here, because I know how this can sound. There was nothing between us that was not innocent. There was a past book. There was a wildflower once tucked into the bag with the squash. There were words, that was all. And yet in our world, words were already too much. What I did not know that summer was that someone had already begun to notice. I would not learn this for months. But somewhere, in the quiet way that things travel in an Amish community. Not through gossip exactly, but through glances held a little too long across the supper table at a frolic. Somewhere, a thread had already been pulled. I think now of my cousin Lydia, 2 years older than me, who had also wandered once. She had been sent upstate to a stricter household, and after that, no one spoke her name at our supper table. Not once. Her chair was still there. Her name was not. I should have read Lydia's empty chair like a warning. I did not. At 15, you cannot read warnings written in silence. You can only read what people say to your face, and no one in my family ever said anything to my face. So when Caleb told me, near the end of August, that his family was leaving the following week, and that he wanted to give me one thing before he went, just one thing, just a goodbye, I said yes. I told myself it was not rebellion. I told myself it was an ending, not a beginning. I told myself a lot of things that night. Walking to the barn after my parents had gone to bed. The lantern light is shaking because my hand is shaking. The hay smells sweet and old. Caleb is holding the wildflower. His thumb is on my wrist. The barn door creaks. My father is standing in the doorway, and he is not moving, and he is not speaking. He looks at Caleb. He looks at me. The silence stretches so long I can hear the horses breathing in the next stall. And then, very softly, almost gently, he says one word. He says Caleb's name. Just that, Caleb. And then he says, "Son, go home now." Caleb goes. The barn door closes behind him. And then it is only my father and me, and the lantern, and the longest silence of my life, until he finally says, "Sit down, Rebecca. We need to talk about who you want to be." The lantern is lower now. My father sits down on an overturned crate across from me, slow, the way he sits down at the end of a long day. The smell of kerosene is sharper than before, and somewhere outside an owl is calling. I am bracing for the verse. I am bracing for the bishop's name. I am bracing for the word Maydung to enter the barn between us, because I have heard it enter other rooms in our community and never leave the same way. But my father does not say any of those things. He looks at his hands for a long time, and then he begins to tell me a story. He tells me about himself at 17, before the baptism, before the beard, before the woman who became my mother. He tells me there was a summer when he stood at the end of our lane with a packed bag and a bus schedule folded inside his hat. He tells me he had a friend in Ohio who would have taken him in. He tells me he stood there for almost an hour, and then he walked back to the house and he unpacked the bag in the dark so no one would know. He had never said this to anyone, not to my mother, not to his brothers, not to the bishop. He was saying it to me in a barn after midnight because I had given him no other choice. I do not know how to describe what it is like to watch your father become a person in front of you. Until that night, he had been a shape, a voice at the head of the table, a hand on the plow, a back going out the door before sunrise. He had been Gelassenheit walking around in boots. That is the word we use for yielding, for letting go of your own will, for placing yourself beneath God and the church and the community in that order. I had thought my father carried Gelassenheit the way the saints carry it in the Ausbund, the old hymn book, easily, naturally, like breath. That night I learned he carried it the way a man carries a heavy stone, because he had chosen to, every day, for 30 years. He told me he did not regret his choice. He told me our family, our farm, our faith, these were the fruits of that walking back up the lane at 17. And then he said something I have never forgotten. He said, "Rebecca, the church gave me a roof, but it also gave me a ceiling. Both things are true. I want you to know both things before you choose." He did not cry. He did not raise his voice. He only looked at me across the lantern and said, "I will not tell the bishops. I will not tell your mother. You have until your baptism year, and whatever you choose, you must choose it knowing what it costs." We walked back to the house in the dark together. The grass was wet. There was a thin frost coming early that year, and I could see my breath in front of me, small and white and gone. My mother's lamp was still burning in the kitchen window, the way it always burned when one of us was out past dark. I remember thinking she was waiting for me, and not knowing yet whether that was love or surveillance. I think now it was both. Both things are true. My father touched the back of my shoulder once, very lightly before we went inside. He never touched my shoulder again. But someone had seen. I learned this in the way Amish women learn things. Sideways, slowly, through the angle of another woman's back when she does not turn to greet you. At the market. The whisper reached the quilting circle within 2 weeks. It reached my mother before my father could reach her first. She never asked me about it. She never raised her voice. She only began, very quietly, to set my plate at supper about 2 inches farther from the rest. No one commented. No one had to. The Maidung does not have to be official to be felt. A daughter knows when her own mother has moved her plate. I wrote to my cousin Lydia for the first time in 2 years. I did not know if the letter would reach her, or if her new household would let her open it. It took 6 weeks for her answer to come back. The envelope had no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with one line written across it in her round, careful handwriting. "Whatever you choose, choose it with your eyes open. I held that paper for a long time. I understood for the first time that Lydia had not failed. Lydia had chosen. And my father, in the barn, had given me the one thing his community had never given him, and had never given Lydia either. He had given me daylight. The months that followed were the slowest of my life. I went to the singings and did not sing. I sat in baptism classes, where the words I had said since I was a child sat on my tongue like small stones I could not swallow. A boy from a neighboring farm asked my father for permission to court me, and I neither accepted nor refused. I only asked for time, and my father gave it to me without a single question. I watched my mother bake bread. I watched my younger sisters pin their caps. I watched my own hands and tried to imagine them at 30, at 40, at 70, kneading the same dough in the same kitchen, and I tried to ask myself honestly whether those hands would be at peace. I will not tell you here exactly what I chose. I will tell you that I chose it in daylight, the way my father asked me to. I will tell you I carry both worlds inside one body now. I still smell my mother's bread in my dreams. I still pray in Pennsylvania Dutch when I am frightened, because that is the language God first heard from me. I still love the people who set my plate slightly apart, and I understand why they did it, and I do not hold it against them. The system asked them to. The system asks all of us to do things we would not do on our own. The system is not the people. The people are doing the best they can inside it. I kept the wildflower Caleb gave me that night, not because of Caleb. I have not thought of Caleb in years, and I hope wherever he is well, and he remembers a quiet girl at a fence who taught him nothing he could not have learned from a better teacher. I kept the wildflower because of what my father said next to it. I pressed it inside the back cover of an old hymn book, and I carried that hymn book with me when I left, and I still have it. The flower is brown now. The petals are paper thin, but the lantern light is still in it, somehow. So is my father's voice. And if you are listening to me tonight, and you are sitting somewhere, very still, because you also carry two worlds inside one body, the world you were given and the world you suspect you were made for, I want you to hear me. You are not a sinner for wondering. You are not a traitor for asking. The people who raised you were doing the best they could with what they were given, and you are allowed to love them and still walk a different road. Both things are true. They will always be true. That is the secret no one tells a 15-year-old girl in a barn. The barn door opened that night, and my father did not close it. He let the cold air in. He let the lantern flicker. He let me see him, finally, as a man and not a wall. And years later, when I walked through a door of my own choosing, I understood that he had been opening doors for me my whole life, in the quiet way that strong men sometimes do, not by leading me through, but by leaving them unlocked, and walking away, and trusting me to find them in the dark.